So my first couple years teaching, I would say that writing seemed really complex to me. My third year teaching, I reached out to someone at the district and I was like, I need help coming up with how to teach writing. So someone actually came in my room and modeled for me. So let's get right into it. How can I plan an entire writing lesson? Before we get started, what grade levels can this be appropriate? I would say all grade levels starting at least by third. Younger kiddos might need a lot more help, but I have observed this being done in a third grade classroom. My personal philosophy for teaching is everything should be modeled. So of course, in this writer's workshop, we're going to talk about every step being modeling. So before you get started on creating a writing lesson, what type of writing are the students going to be learning? So for me, when I taught my first ever writing lesson for all my classes, I always started with something personal that happened to me. So I always started with my trip to Oregon, and I always talked about how my boyfriend and I went on this trip to Oregon, and I talk about how can I share this story with a reader? So that's where my starting point is. And I think that this is really helpful because this also connects with the students. So this is a personal story for them. So this gets them excited about writing because they really can make it however they choose. So let's look at the components that make up a paper. You have a title, you have a hook, you have an introductory sentence, you have an introductory paragraph, you have body paragraphs, and then you have your solution and conclusion. So these are the basic things that make up a paper. So as a teacher, you are going to teach writing in chunks. So we're sticking with our same story, but I'm breaking up how to write that story in chunks. So let's start with that. So let's pretend that I am going to be writing about a trip that I made to Oregon. I am going to model the first step in the writing process, which is brainstorming. So I'm going to model how to brainstorm in front of my students. I actually have a video called How to Write a Spooky Story, and I model how to brainstorm. I will attach it so you have an idea of how I would actually go about brainstorming and modeling for my students. We want to keep that original brainstorm throughout the whole writing process while we're working with our students. So the first day, that's all I'm doing. I am going to brainstorm and model my story that I'm going to be writing. So I stand in front of my class, I think out loud, and I model, and then I say, okay, now it is your turn. You are going to set a timer on the board. Because students can take 5 minutes, students can take a half hour. So you decide what works for your class. Now let's talk about the second step. This is where they're going to independent practice. So whether I'm teaching them how to brainstorm, write a hook, introductory sentence, whatever I am teaching, they always practice right after I am done modeling. And remember, I'm only modeling one skill at a time. So I'm done with showing them how to model a brainstorm. I'm going to set my timer 10 to 15 minutes, and my students are going to independently practice brainstorming. At this time, I am pulling students to the back table and working with them. I am walking around. So this is really giving me a chance to get a formative assessment on how it's going. I see 5 students doing something that I need to correct. I'm going to bring everyone's attention back, and I'm going to quickly cover what they're doing. Next, the timer has gone off. Independent practice is over. The last step that I like to do in my writer's workshop is let students share their brainstorm. They can share at their desk, they can share standing up, they can go the front of the room, you can put their brainstorm on the document viewer, however you choose to do this as a teacher. But you want your students to always verbalize what they learned. So here is my brainstorm. And then as a teacher, I like to ask questions. Okay, what is on your brainstorm? Did this help you come up with ideas that you might write about? There are some students who are going to write nothing. They are going to struggle. So one thing I like to include is that if you don't have all your ideas today, that's okay. That's why we share, so that they can also get other ideas. So again, while you're walking around and you have a student who is struggling, you might pull up a chair next to them or pull them to the back table and spend a little bit of time working with them. So the next day comes, I taught brainstorm. I'm going to move right along onto the hook. So how I do this is, again, I would give some examples on writing a hook. Why do writers write hooks? What is it about them that makes them important in a writing paper or my creative writing piece. So after I show examples of a writing hook, I'm then again going to think out loud. I'm writing about my trip to Oregon. Using my brainstorm, I'm going to think of something that could be a hook. Maybe I'm going to ask the reader a question. Have you ever seen a whale in the ocean? Okay, and then that could lead into my trip to Oregon. So whatever you choose to write as a hook, I personally, no matter the grade level, I would only stick to about 2 to 3 hooks as an example. You never want to overwhelm things. You want to keep it really simplistic. So I taught my hook to the students. Again, I'm going to set a timer and it's their turn to independent practice. So they're going to spend some time writing a hook. Now you're going to have students who finish writing a hook within 30 seconds and you're going to have students who finish writing a hook in 10 minutes. So you can tell the students who finish writing the hook quickly, I want you to go back and write another hook. So now I am differentiating the lesson. I'm providing more opportunities in writing for my higher students, and my lower students, again, I might pull them to the table. I might pull up a chair next to them, and I might help them. An option, just like with reading and math lessons, take a higher kiddo and work them with the lower kiddo to help them write a hook. Sometimes that can be really effective. So my students wrote their hooks, the timer's up, and you guessed it, they share out loud what they came up with for writing a hook. The fun thing is writing hooks are actually really fun. And I remember some students to be like, because they were just really intrigued about the hooks. So I might say, oh, Johnny, does that sound interesting to you? And they might say, yeah, that sounds really fun. Or, ooh, I wonder what's going to happen next. So keep them engaged about hooks. So again, you always want to have that share opportunity at the end. So you'll notice that in the writer's workshop, I model students practice, then we come together. So then the next day comes along. I have taught how to brainstorm. I have taught how to write a hook. And now let's say I'm going to start on an introductory paragraph. The first thing I'm going to do now is review. Okay, we've done a brainstorm. After I brainstormed, we then did our hook. Now that I've done my hook, I'm ready to start actually writing. So this is how I'm going to pull these key details from my brainstorm topic web. I always wrote out my introductory paragraphs and my body paragraphs and my conclusion paragraphs and solution before I taught my lesson. It's important that one, you model how to do it, but when you're modeling, there's a lot of things going on and you're going to make mistakes. So you always want to have a teacher example backup. So that backup is what I actually use on the board as my students are independently writing. This is a common question that may come up. Should I be teaching statements? Should I be teaching grammar? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? No. Right now, you are only focusing on how to write an introductory paragraph. When I was in school, studies showed that students improved on their writing from writing. There wasn't any magical thing, it's just getting them to write. If I am focusing on their grammar too much, if I'm focusing on all these little things, that's going to discourage them from writing. So I want to set up an environment where they feel I'm just writing, right? We're doing the writing process. I'm just writing. I am not focused on any of my errors at this moment. Okay. So again, I modeled my introductory paragraph. I have it now, my teacher model on the smartboard or however you show your students, and I'm going to set a timer. Now, this is going to obviously take a lot longer, so be realistic on your timer. But again, you are walking around the room and you are working with your students. If students are doing well, there are sometimes with some lessons, my students are doing great, everyone's on task. I might go over and read someone's paragraph or couple sentence and just give feedback at that moment. Okay, so my timer is up and same thing. We're gonna stop and we're gonna share our introductory paragraph. Maybe some students provide feedback to the student, like we talk about how to share feedback, but I didn't understand what you were saying, or who's they? You kept saying they and him. And who's that? Oh, I meant my dad. So sometimes students giving feedback is really helpful. Okay, then that's the end of the lesson. I did my introductory paragraph and the next day comes around. So the nice thing about all of this is that students are in this process of writing. I also have a full lesson on my channel about modeling introductory paragraph, body paragraph, conclusion. It moves a little bit quicker than I would normally do it in class just because I was filming a video, but that's kind of how I would go through the process of writing a hook and my paragraphs. Then once you get to the body paragraph, this is where I like to talk about having a problem in the story. You could introduce it in the introduction. For me, when I do an introduction, I kind of like to talk about the setting, the people. You're setting up what's going to happen. You're leading into the problem. Now that I have my body paragraph, I have to also model how I'm going to have a problem. With a creative writing piece, you do not necessarily have a problem. Okay, so I modeled my body paragraphs. I have my students working on it. Usually the body paragraphs are going to take the longest. So this may be a 2 or 3 day independent practice. So the next day comes along, I tell my students, you are working on your body paragraphs or your introductory paragraph. If you weren't finished, I'm going to be working with students at the back table. So a student was absent, I'm pulling them to go over body paragraph. If a student needs help, I'm also pulling them to the back table. If a student needs an extension, they're ready to kind of move on. You can kind of give them a glimpse of what you're going to do the next day. So that way when the next day comes along, they can work on it a little bit more. All right, so you are pretty much almost done. Last, I'm going to do my conclusion paragraph. This is probably where I'm going to have my solution if I'm having a problem solution paper. Again, I model the conclusion, I have my timer on the board, and my students write it out. Now I'm ready for a revision and how to edit my paper. Again, with both of these, I am going through the writing process. I am crossing out words that are spelled incorrectly. I am modeling how to use a dictionary. I am modeling every single skill, and again, I'm giving my students class time. So towards the end of this process, what I would do is I would have students work with partners how to edit and revise their papers, because we talk about it can be really hard to find your own mistakes because your brain likes to correct it for you. So having students work with partners together is really important. And then you can still have them share. What is easy about revising our paper? What did we notice when we were going through and we were working with our partner to edit? What did we notice about that? So talking about this is important too, because I like to tell my students that skills can be challenging and it's okay to admit, hey, this seems kind of challenging. So going through this process with them, not at them, is huge. All right, so that's the end of how to have writer's workshop and go step by step. The nice thing about a writer's workshop is you can always just have them have a writing journal, and you just teach little skills throughout the week and they use their writing journal. And then you can go through and help them edit and revise at the back table together. So when it did come time to actually revise and edit, what I did to save myself from time is I did pull students to the back table one by one. I did not edit and revise their entire paper in that one sitting. So the student and I would go through their paper together, and I would find the mistakes and the revisions, and I would give some feedback. And then I would say, okay, what are you noticing as we're doing this together? And the student might say, I have a lot of spelling mistakes. Okay, if you don't know how to spell a word, what can you do? And they can talk about, well, I can go ahead and circle it, right? That's part of how we edit. So I say, okay, go back to your desk and work on your paper. And then I'm going to pull my next student. So you're giving them opportunities to revise and edit on their own as well. Then I have them rewrite the paper before they turn it in for me to edit and revise, because I don't want all of the messiness when I'm trying to grade, because it's too much. I don't always know what they're trying to do. I then get their papers back that they rewrote, provide the feedback and everything that I am looking for, and then they get it back. And the nice thing about this is you can build portfolios throughout the year on students in their writing at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. So the student got my paper back that I had to edit, and then they are gonna now rewrite it. Now for me, I might add in how to come up with a title in the middle, at the end, Personally, for me, I'm not super strict on a perfect title. So I might say, I'm going to title my paper, My Trip to Oregon. That's how I'm going to title it, okay? So it really just depends on what you're working on as far as title. That's why I kind of didn't get into it too much, because this can be very flexible. So I could do that as soon as I start writing, or again, if you are doing a creative writing piece where it's a full-blown story, you might say, wait till, you have your story put together to make a title. If you have made it this far, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. There is a lot that goes into writing, right? Indentation, complete sentences. So over time, you can build on this. If you feel overwhelmed, imagine how your students feel. That's the best advice I ever got. I remember one time I was working with a teacher and I was like, I feel so overwhelmed with this math lesson. She's like, imagine how your students are going to feel. So it's the same thing. If you feel overwhelmed, take a step back and say, what can I do to make this very simple for myself so that I can actually teach it? So make sure that you are always doing your teacher examples ahead of time. You are modeling and figuring out how you want to model ahead of time, and then just have fun with it, because really writing is really fun. All right, so if you have not seen any of my other videos on how to plan a reading or math lesson, check those out after this. And again, I do have lessons that have me modeling brainstorming, how to write a hook, how to write introductory, body, and ending paragraph. And I will see you in my next video. Have a beautiful day.